Bader.
I don't want to just balance this here. Forgive me for my technical difficulties. Hello, everyone. As Drew said, my name is Molly Bader, and I had the opportunity to go to Rwanda this year for the second time. And for that, I have to thank my parents for helping me to get there, and also the Office of Undergraduate Research for giving us some funding. And my theme for this year's Rwanda trip is Joy Transcends Suffering. So, a little bit about me, for some background. I'm a senior, I almost said junior, I'm a senior theater major with a minor in painting. I am an actress and an artist, and I firmly believe that storytelling and the arts have a really important place in changing the world. So it's been really exciting for me to be able to take this trip twice. Going to Rwanda last year had a really profound impact on my life and who I am as a person, and I spent an entire year hoping and wishing that I could somehow find a way to go back. So this year was really exciting for me. So to give you a little bit more background on the genocide, I know Lily already started us off with that. In 1994, there was a genocide against the Tutsi minority and the Hutu moderates. And this divide between Hutu and Tutsi goes back long before 1994. This actually started in pre-colonial Rwanda, when the only distinction between Hutu and Tutsi from who was a social class distinction. If you were Hutu, you had less than 10 cows, and if you were Tutsi, you had more. So the difference between Hutu and Tutsi was not, as many people believe, an old tribal rift or anything like that. They were the same people, it was just a difference in socioeconomic status. When European colonists arrived in Rwanda, they exacerbated this drift between these people. They raised the status of the Tutsis because they were higher class. And they claimed falsely that Tutsis looked different than Hutus, that they had more European features, and that they were somehow better. So this class distinction continued to grow, and of course tensions built as the years went on. Eventually, the people in power continued to increase this divide, and resentment against the Tutsis began to build. This really shadows a lot of other genocides that have happened in the world, because they blamed the Tutsis for a lot of problems that Rwanda has, much like in the Holocaust, people in Germany blamed the Jews. It was very simplified. So in 1994, the genocide was actually happening, but before that, the Hutu extremists had attempted a genocide on the Tutsis several times before. It was only successful in 1994 because that was when the rest of the world turned away. After Black Hawk Down, America pulled out of Africa, and the rest of the world went with it. So when the rest of the world says, we're not going to pay any attention to you, that's really good news if you're trying to plan a genocide. So in April of 1994, as Lily mentioned, a group of Hutu extremists, not all Hutus, it was a group of extremists, murdered 1 million Tutsis and Hutu moderates in 100 days. And the perpetrators were mostly uneducated farmers, they were often illiterate, and they were killing people with farm tools like machetes. So an important thing to examine here is why and how do genocides happen? So after every single genocide, the world always likes to say, never again. After the Holocaust, you see this in Holocaust memorials, we all say never again. But the fact of the matter is that genocides continue to happen. Genocides are happening in the world right now, in Syria, Sudan, the Congo, and many more. And it always follows the same formula. So for genocide to happen, a group has to be blamed for the problems of a nation or another group. People have to be generalized and dehumanized. In the Holocaust, the Jews were called rats. In the Rwandan genocide, the Tutsis were called cockroaches. If you're lumping together a group of people and dehumanizing them, it makes it a lot easier to convince people that they need to be eliminated. They have to be government funded, and good people must do nothing. That is the most important factor of any genocide, is the bystander. They're the largest group of people, and there are always people standing by and letting these things happen. I wanted to use these two images because there is an eerily striking similarity between this image of a man's nose being measured to determine whether he is Hutu or Tutsi, and a man's nose being measured to determine whether or not he is Jewish. It's the same formula every time. So, last year, my theme that I came away from Rwanda with was detachment inhibits healing. I was really struck by the enormity of the loss of the genocide and how far the Rwandan people have come since then. It was very clear that the country was able to heal and forgive by fully accepting what had happened to them and processing through it together. In America, we often push reality to the side, and we try to make things easier by putting them away. In Rwanda, as Lily discussed with the memorials, that really doesn't happen. It's very in your face, and it's very clear that that's been an important processing tool for them. But this year, I knew it was going to be different. I knew that, in many ways, I knew what to expect, so I wouldn't be as shocked. So I took away something very different, and that this year was the importance of joy. So, traveling to Rwanda took a really long time. It's about 24 full hours of travel, which I'm sure you can imagine, those of you who haven't done it, it's exhausting. So by the time we finally arrived in the Kigali airport, the capital of Rwanda, I was exhausted and drained, and I wanted to take a shower and go to bed. I didn't know what time it was. And I have this really distinct memory of stepping out of the airport into the bright Kigali sun, and my eyes fell on one person, and suddenly I felt myself beaming in a way that I haven't in a really long time. And that person was this person. His name is Eric. And Eric was our guide last year from Global Engagement Institute, and he was going to be our guide again this year. And Eric is so much more than a guide to us. He's a friend, he's a brother, he's absolutely a member of our AFP family, and he is just about the funniest Rwandan you will ever meet. But he also lost people in the genocide, and he was about 10 years old when the genocide happened. So this is a person who has experienced extreme suffering and loss, and yet he is the brightest and most joyful soul that I think I've ever met. And to see him in front of me, after the last time I left Rwanda, I left him feeling like I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again. So to see this person in front of me and hug him and laugh and greet him, that was the moment where I really felt like I had arrived, because he symbolized so much of what Rwanda means to me and to many of us. So, something really exciting that we got to do this year that we didn't get to do as much of last year was teacher training. As Lily mentioned, Rwanda is starting a new curriculum, competency-based education, this year. So drama-based education that AFP does fits in perfectly. So what is drama-based education? So drama-based education is based on the idea that students learn better when they can engage their bodies in their learning. So how many of you feel like you learn best if someone lectures at you and you take notes? Anyone? That's good. But a lot of people don't. It makes it really difficult for children especially, who are so used to moving their bodies and wanting to move their bodies, to be told they have to sit still in a desk all day long, and that is the best way for them to learn. So drama-based education uses storytelling to creatively engage students in any subject matter by using their bodies and putting the information through their bodies. And this actually is not only fun, it increases the retention of the materials taught. It's the idea that if you teach your brain something, you're going to forget it, but if you get it in your body, that sense memory will help you to remember and retain that information long past the test. So, actually, go back, I forgot that I was going to say something else. So, these people are Wellspring Academy teacher trainers. We met these people last year, and it was really exciting to see them again and hear from them about how they had implemented what we had taught them last year. They had questions, they were excited to jump right back into the work, and these are people who teach trainers, who teach teachers. They're teacher trainers, and they will have an impact on hundreds of teachers and hundreds of students across Rwanda for this new curriculum. So our work with these people could potentially reach children across the entire country, which is hard to even imagine. All right. So another place where we got to teach teachers was this place called the Earl Kundu Foundation. Earl Kundu means love. I will get back to that place in a moment. But this place hosted a conference where we taught teachers for 2 days. And this was a really big group of people, so this actually made me a little bit nervous because there were so many people, Drew and Eve could not facilitate by themselves. So us, the students, had to be the facilitators. So we were split up into groups of 2. My partner was John, who's not here, but he was very helpful. And we were each given about 15 teachers to work with. And it was really interesting because these are professionals and I'm a student, and it was a little scary at first to think, I don't know if I know enough to be teaching these people. But I think John would agree with me that as we started, it was really phenomenal to see how much we knew and how well we could articulate what we knew. And our group of people started out really shy and polite. Rwandans in particular are very polite. So we were a little worried, are they really going to get into this? Are they going to be willing to be silly? But as we went on, after we played some games, we really saw them jumping in. We like to, in the Anne Frank Project, often come back to breath, because if we breathe together, we are a village, and it clears our minds, and we can focus on what's happening next. It brings us back to the present. So we would try to breathe between every game, but eventually, they would start doing it themselves. John and I would start to say something, and they would go, we must breathe first. They would all join hands, and they would breathe. And it was wonderful. At another point, John and I were trying to determine who would run the next round of a game, and one of them very politely said, excuse me, could one of us do it? And it was just the sweetest moment, because it really felt like exactly what was supposed to happen. Of course, these people who will be teaching it to students should be leading these activities, but we had no idea that they would be so willing and so open to jump into it like that. I think my favorite moment from this, it was a very funny moment towards the end of our first day. We had been playing a game called Abstract Museum, which is very simple. One person will leave the room, and the group of people will use their voices and bodies to be an abstract idea. And it's usually something like joy or fear or anger, something like that. The person comes back, they try to guess what they are. So this time, they had John and I leave the room, and when we came back, they were all stumbling around and slurring, and we were like, are you guys drunk? And this group of professionals just all started laughing hysterically like they were 12 and they were just messing around. And it was such a clear moment of that idea of how childlike wonder and joy and humor can help people learn, and that it's not out of place in the learning environment. It was really fun. And this was actually a really important experience for me, because I'm an actress, I'm an artist, I do a lot of creative things. And I've been kind of in denial for a while about the fact that I might also be a teacher. I've worked with kids for years. I worked at a summer camp for 5 years. I love to teach and I love to learn. But because of the way the school system is right now, I've often felt that doesn't make sense for me. But this experience sort of made me realize that even if I'm not a traditional classroom teacher, the things that I have to offer can still help the community in one way or another, whether it's through after-school programs or starting something myself or doing theater with children or anything like that. So that was just a really important moment of realization for me that I might also be a teacher, in addition to all those other things. So I mentioned before that we were staying at a place called Earl Kundu, and Earl Kundu means love. So could you play the video that's just a weird picture of me? Yeah. Oh, it's upside down. That's okay.
Let it go. That was cool.
Okay, so those are some of my friends from Earl Kundu village. As you can tell, they really like to sing. Earl Kundu is a remarkable place, and we stayed there for 4 days, and it is a home for children who have been abandoned. This sounds like a really depressing place to be, but I can honestly say that this is the happiest that I was in the entire trip. This is a place that was founded and is run by a woman named Arlene Brown, who goes by Mama Arlene. She's an 87-year-old woman from Pennsylvania who is one of the craziest and most inspiring people that I've ever met in my life. She's 87, she's an absolute spitfire, and she runs the place like nobody's business. And it's a really remarkable community. They have schools, they have housing, they have food, they have a garden and a dental clinic and a soccer field. Everything that these children could need is provided for them. And a lot of these children come from really rough beginnings. She talked about children being found in dumpsters or latrines for various reasons. Maybe they were sick, maybe their families couldn't afford to take care of them. And I'd just like to highlight a few children who are really special to me and their stories to give you a sense. So this little girl right here, her name is Rebecca. And Rebecca is 6 years old, and the first day we met, she decided that she and I were best friends. She actually told me, "You're mine, you're nobody else's." And I said, "Well, Rebecca, I really want to be friends with all of you. Can't I be friends with all of you?" And she paused. She looked dead in my eyes and she said, "No." So Rebecca is this hilarious, feisty little girl. And when I asked Mama about her story, she said that Rebecca had been left as a baby by her mother at another woman's house, who later brought her to Earl Kundu. And every time I would see her, she would throw her arms around me and give me this big smile. It was really hard to think about what had happened in her life to bring her here. But also to recognize how happy she can be now was really miraculous. Another child I want to talk about, this little boy in his Spider-Man outfit. It's not a very good picture, but he was the one who was singing. His name is So-So. He is 4 years old, and he is an absolute sweetheart. He really likes to sing, and after he was born, his mother took a motorbike home from the hospital because that was all she could afford, but she was hemorrhaging, and she actually died. So the man who was driving the bike took the baby to Mama Arlene's because there was nowhere else for him to go. So they named him, and he's been living here ever since. And he's just such a kind, sweet little boy. I remember one of my favorite moments there was he learned that I knew the words to Let It Go, so he wanted me to sing it about 14 times in a row. And there was a point one evening where I had about 4 different kids piled on me, and we were all sitting on the floor just singing the same 2 songs over and over again. And So-So kept beckoning me to him and cupping his hand around my ear and just whispering, "I love you." And it was so sweet. And to think that he came from there and now he can be safe and he can be cared for was really remarkable. I want to talk about another little girl who's actually not pictured here. Her name is Claudine, and Claudine has a really remarkable story. She was born blind, and when she was 3 years old, she was brought to Mama Arlene's because there was a doctor in town who could give her an operation. But she was so malnourished that if they tried in her current state, it would probably kill her. I believe Mama said that when she was 3 years old and brought to her, Claudine weighed about 10 pounds. So Mama took her in, and they cared for her, and they got her up to health. They also learned that she had a hole in her heart. So Mama provided the funds and raised the money for both of these operations. And now Claudine is this really precocious, smart little girl who just runs around and wants to read books with you. And she really wants to be a doctor, so everyone there, even the adults, call her the doctor. And so to see this kid who could have had such a different life be in this environment where she's not only cared for and supported, but her dreams are validated, and she has the hope for the future that she could become something else, that was really remarkable to watch. Now, Earl Kundu Village was founded by Mama Arlene through a Christian faith. It's a really important facet of her community there. I was raised Christian, but I remember feeling a little weird about it growing up. Certain elements of it didn't really click with me. But being here, it really seemed like the religion that she preached and believed in was pure love. And it was really beautiful to watch that religion can impact people's lives in that way. And Mama actually told us when she was giving us her backstory, she said, "Be careful what you pray for, because you might get sent to Africa." But she so clearly believes in what she's doing, and it's such an important part of her life, and it's a really remarkable place. By talking about this place, I don't want to perpetuate the myth that we need to save the African child. I want to remind you all that there are homeless children in America and everywhere in the world. But this place is not a place of depression. This is a place of pure light and joy, and the place that this woman has created transcends any of the suffering that these children may have had, because this was truly the highlight of my entire trip. Oh, there you go. Okay, so this is a picture that Lily took of Eve and I. Eve is drawing on my face with clay. There was actually a mini rock slide in front of us that might have killed us, but it didn't, so it's fine. And the clay from it we later discovered we could draw on each other with, so this was a clear moment of something that could have been scary, but we turned into something really fun. This is a quote from a poem that I would like to read to you all now. I discovered this poem when I was listening to a talk on my iPod on the plane ride here, to Rwanda. And it's called A Brief for the Defense by Jack Gilbert, and it really encapsulates everything that I feel about Rwanda, particularly from this trip. So, Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship, anchored late at night in the tiny port looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come. So I really loved that poem because I feel like it really speaks to the idea that joy is important and that our world is so challenging and so many hardships are faced by so many people. But the idea that we have to give the same amount of importance to our happiness and our joy that we do to our suffering and our sadness is something that I don't think people recognize often enough. We see happiness as something that is lesser. It's not as important to be happy. But when you think about it, in the world, what could be more important in our lives than our own enjoyment of our lives? So that really was an important message that Rwanda had for me this time. So I would like to finish my presentation with this quote that Drew started off with. God spends his days all over the world, but he sleeps in Rwanda. Rwanda for me is a symbol of everything that humanity is capable of. I think of Rwanda when I need to remember what it means to be a human being. The world is hard and life is hard, but when things get too much to bear, thinking of everything Rwanda has done reminds me to be hopeful and reminds me that you could always find the joy. And especially from this past experience that I had, it reminds me that it's our job to find the joy. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?